So we have a question from Hetty about how to practice editing manuscripts, specifically how to learn to identify a problem and then how to learn how to fix the problem without having to rely on outside feedback. This is one of the things that is, I think, the difference between someone who makes it as a writer and someone who enjoys writing but never progresses beyond that. I believe that talent is the ability to recognize a mistake and to fix it. But I also think that's a thing that you can learn, or at least the how to fix it part of it. So the recognizing mistakes, remember that first you are a reader and you have spent your entire life honing your skills as a reader and your taste. So when you're having a reaction to your own writing, it's the same kind of reaction that you have to something that you read. But all it tells you is there's something wrong here. What becomes useful for you as a writer is to learn tools that are language based so that you can describe the problem, because then once you can articulate what that problem is, then you can start to learn how to fix it. When I am thinking about what is wrong with a story, I usually start with how am I responding to it? And I find that it breaks into the same four things that I look at for as a reader. It's either awesome, it's a little boring, it's confusing, or I just don't believe it. So when it's awesome, hurrah! Don't touch that. Good job. Do more of that. Boring is where you sit down to write and you just get a little drowsy. What's going on there is that you are boring yourself, literally. So you either back up and make a different choice, or you look at basically your pacing. This is either taking too long, or you haven't explained to me as the reader why it's important. Confused is almost always an order of information problem. So if you read it and you're like, huh, does this make sense? A lot of times it actually does. Like you've thought it through in your brain, but it just isn't on the page. So what you have to do then is just bring the information up a little bit, just surface it a little bit more for the reader. Sometimes it is a plot problem, and then you just have to replot it. Then you have disbelief, and disbelief is where you're violating the world. So if you're doing something, you're like, why would he do that? That's probably a disbelief thing. If you're like, I don't think someone could survive a fall out of a 13-story window, that's a disbelief thing. And that is actually not that hard to actually fix. If it's a character thing, most of the time you just haven't gotten their motivation out on the page. When it's a physical world thing, you treat it like a confusion point. If they would survive a fall out of a 13-story window, you just need to get us that information sooner. If they wouldn't, you have a plot hole, and you fix it the way you would fix a plot hole. I could keep going, but those are the kinds of tools that you're going to be reaching for. So the first thing that I would probably do to practice that is learn how to identify a problem in someone else's work, so that when you come back to your own work, you've honed that tool and you can apply it to your work. Even you can do this with published fiction, like, grab some Isaac Asimov and say, how would I write this if I wanted the character to be like a well-rounded actual human woman instead of a piece of cardboard? Like, what changes would you make? That's a way to identify a problem and correct it, and to practice it with something that's not so precious to you. What are your thoughts, Howard?
Um, I agree with everything, and you stuck the landing for me when you said, and practice on other people's stuff, because I think just last night Sandra and I were watching Twisters, um, the the new tornado movie, and there is a scene. I love the movie. There is a scene in which our two leads are supposed to be making an emotional connection, and the girl says, I was a dumb kid. I I thought I could make a difference. And I immediately wrote the next line of dialogue, which they didn't use, which would have made the connection much more effective for me, because what he did was, just sort of nod and say, you weren't a dumb kid. What I would have said was, um, last night when you led us all into the swimming pool, you made a difference by, just by way of acknowledging, hey, don't diss yourself. You did a thing right, and allow us to, because after that awesome swimming pool scene, we don't reprocess it. We don't go back to it and process it again. And yes, I'm terrible to watch TV with. Um,
Can confirm.
but I watch these things and I realize, uh, this is how I would write it to be more effective in this way. That doesn't mean that they wrote it wrong. It means that they're disagreeing with my headcanon, and that's a totally different class of problem. But fundamentally, this is practice for me, because when I sit down and write a scene where someone is saying, man, I'm trying to accomplish something worthwhile, one of the other characters, if I'm writing it, is going to point out, you accomplished something worthwhile yesterday. Why do you keep forgetting the good things you've done?
This is
Um,
something my therapist asks me. Oh, wait.
and and I guess part of that stems from, I like fiction in which we model good behavior.
Yeah.
But it comes back to, whatever you're consuming, as someone who creates things that are similar to what you consume, you kind of have to become a discerning, critical, thoughtful, awake consumer of those things. Um, and that way, the movies that you buy on pay-per-view are tax deductible.
These are the important things. Great question. Thank you.